Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Danny Welniak. Now, we're going to start this show a little bit differently tonight. Yesterday, you heard the full 11-minute recording of Tyreek Hill and his fiancée Crystal Espinal speaking in an airport. Months earlier, KCTV5 made the decision to air parts of that recording, but did not make the full tape available. That was an effort headed by the investigative team and other members of management, not the sports department. Many of you are upset and have been asking to hear from us about the reasoning behind that decision. I want you to know that we've heard and we understand the calls for an explanation, and that's exactly what we want to give you. But we wanted you to be the ones to ask the questions, not me. So tonight, we took the questions that you asked us most online, and we'll get them answered for you live right here on our show right now. So our news director, Casey Clark, will join us. He's one of the people closest to handling that tape. And Casey, the biggest question people want to know right now is, why was that full audio not made available?
Well, let's take a minute to think about what exactly the time parameters were when we released that. We had gotten the audio delivered to us on, I believe it was Sunday, and the person who gave it to us did not give us permission at that time to air it. They gave us permission to verify it. So we spent a few days making sure that the people on the audio were in fact Crystal and Tyreek. And then after the district attorney on Wednesday said that he believed a crime had been committed, but he could not prosecute, that's when our source came back to us and said, you can run with the audio. So the following day, that's what we did. And being that it was specifically about the relationship that Crystal and Tyreek had with their son and the mess that that had become, the story was focused on that.
Casey, the part of the audio discussing their relationship in 2014, many have argued that that part is newsworthy. Just today, we heard that opinion on national radio, locally, including in a column in the KC Star. What explanation can you offer as to why that piece of audio was considered not newsworthy?
It's fair. It's fair. We debated it a lot. I would say the biggest thing is when you listen to it in its totality, there's a lot talking about their parenting style and what happened in that tumultuous threesome. And then they go off and talk about what happened in 2014. Our feeling on it was that 2014 had been asked and answered. He pleaded guilty, and he, up to this point, had never publicly claimed anything having to do with him being falsely accused, wrongly prosecuted. He pleaded guilty. So the fact that they went off onto a tangent and it sounds like a marital argument, it didn't have relevance to, and I understand some people disagree with us, but we make editorial calls every day, and that was an editorial call.
Why not release it in full to allow the public to make their own opinions on it?
Again, a good question. Maybe it's a generational thing for me, but first and foremost, I'm not a digital first guy. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I think TV first. And when you take anything raw and post it online, there are unintended consequences. And we tried to think through a bunch of those. And one of the first ones that really bothered me was we didn't know if our source could be identified by the audio if we posted it in its entirety. The audio that we have has a very distinct beginning and a very distinct end. And if we posted it in its entirety, Crystal probably would know who was the person that shared it with us. So that was the first thing. The other thing is there's a disturbing part in there where Tyreek talks about not wanting to have children. And I, as a dad, looked at that and said, I would hate to have something like that live in perpetuity on the internet. And I couldn't live with myself if we had taken a chunk of something like that and given it life forever. So I just felt like it was better for us if we took the parts that were relevant, put them on the news. We're not a blog. We're not 24-hour talk radio. We are journalists. We make editorial calls every day. We decide what to keep and what not to keep all the time. And that's where we drew the line.
So what, if anything, would you do differently?
What would I do differently? It's a good question. I'd say we'd probably be more transparent up front once we aired the audio of what some of the stuff was that we were holding back and why. Because now everybody's kind of up in a tizzy about, oh my God, there's this 4-minute chunk that we never heard before. But I mean, we did play a little teeny snippet of that at the end of our second piece, which aired at 10 o'clock on Thursday, the 25th of April, where he does mention 2014, and he does say to her something along the lines of, he questions her motives and whether or not she's in this for the money. We did keep that in there because we thought that that was relevant, because we too have questions about her motivation for making this audio. And Angie said right up front a few times that it was, as we understood it, her insurance policy. She wanted to make sure that she had something to fall back on if the relationship fell apart.
The last thing I want to ask you, going forward for any of our viewers, what would you say to them?
I would say that I would hope that you would take a look at the body of our work, what we do in totality. I mean, Angie Racono, who's getting lit up online, is a great journalist. For those of you who live in Jackson County, you can thank her directly for how much work she's done to try to roll back your property taxes. She's done 2 weeks of amazing work that the county commissioners have looked at and said, you know, there's a problem here. She personally got a guy who should not be performing private autopsies thrown in jail. I mean, she's doing good journalistic work. And the reason I'm standing here is because the buck stops with me. So I'm here, not Angie, because ultimately it was my call.
Casey, thank you so much. We'll be right back with more of your sports headlines.